Welcome back to Piece of Chaos. This week, I am so excited for you to hear from my guest. Her name is Sandy Samberg, and she is a nurse practitioner by trade, but a philanthropist and communicator and just an all-around amazing person. And she's doing incredible work in an area that's sort of new to her around psychedelic-assisted therapy and bringing nurse practitioners into the fold to be able to scale the therapy as it becomes a legal treatment. And she has an amazing story, and I know you're just going to love hearing her journey. And without further ado, please welcome Sandy Samberg.
So when I was 16, I decided that I wanted to be a nurse practitioner. And at the time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go into primary care or mental health. And for a variety of reasons, I decided to go into primary care, but always had that interest in mental health kind of just tucked in the back of my brain. And so I did a handful of different things throughout my career. Most recently, I started a cancer support organization and ran that for around 13, 14 years. And through that, I saw a lot of end of life, and unfortunately saw a lot of end of life that wasn't done particularly well, just with excessive suffering, in my opinion. And so it really hit home when a loved one was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he just kind of spiraled downwards into a deep depression. And we tried every combination of prescription medicines. We tried ketamine. At that point, it was without therapy. It was kind of before the ketamine plus therapy model was well known, and nothing was working. And so it was actually my husband who suggested that we look into psilocybin, that he had, read Michael Pollan's book and had, listened to some podcasts. And so this was really foreign to me, but I decided to keep an open mind and do some research, and it was compelling. And so long story short, he was able to access 2 sessions, and it was completely life-changing, for him, for his family, and just his last year of life. It's kind of strange to say that it was beautiful, but in many ways it was, because he knew what was important in life. His ego just kind of dissolved, and his soft, mushy insides came out, and it was just a really, really profound experience. And so at around the same time when he had stopped treatment, one of my sons, who's not a particularly emotional kid. He was a college athlete, and he kind of is one of those personalities where you just kind of grit through things and doesn't really talk about his emotions. And one night he got really sad and said, I just don't know how he's doing this. How is he getting up every morning knowing that he's going to die so soon? And, what's going through his mind? What does he regret? What does he wish he could just get out of bed and go do? And, it was just a really deep conversation, and I was processing it the next morning as I was lying in bed, and I was like, that's a really good question for anyone to ask themselves. And so I asked myself the question, what would I do if I was, what would I regret if I was diagnosed with a terminal illness? And actually a lot of things came to my mind, and it was a little scary because I'm a happy person. Life is really good. And so I kind of put the brakes on and decided to unpack each of those things. And so one of them was just that I have all of these interests and so many things that I want to explore. And at the time I was working 24/7 for this organization, the cancer support organization that I started, and I loved it. It was just, I was a workaholic, and I was doing it as a volunteer. And I just said, if I were diagnosed with terminal illness right now, I would be pissed at myself. I would be pissed that I had the opportunity to explore these other interests and I didn't do it. And so it was a wake-up call. And so long story short, I decided to put the wheels in motion and pass the torch as executive director. And, in order to free up some time so that I could, pursue some of these other interests. And what was sitting in the back of my head was this mental health idea that I had had since I was a teenager, this interest. And it was that. And then it was, this whole end of life experience and the psychedelic experience, and just kind of wanting to explore that. So I passed the torch, and then I kind of just set out on this learning journey, and initially casted a really wide net within mental health. But it didn't take me long to kind of go down the psychedelic rabbit hole and just realize that there was something here. And just with that profound personal experience, I I wanted to learn more and kind of just see where that path led. And so that was in 2021, early on in 2021. And since then, I have learned an incredible amount. I've met the most fascinating people. And I just, wanted to figure out where I, as one person, could help move the needle forward. And also as two people. So my husband and I have a foundation, and we support a wide range of charitable organizations, but mental health has definitely been an interest of ours. And so I thought, well, maybe there's something we can do also from our foundation. And so anyways, I started to just, meet a lot of people every day. I read articles, I listen to podcasts, I, do webinars. I actually did the MAPS training myself. And so just fully educating myself as much as possible. And so through that, I was trying to figure out what I can do. And certainly, yes, I could become trained to be a facilitator, and that would help X amount of people. But I really wanted to figure out a way where I could have a greater impact than that. And so I started honing in on this anticipated bottleneck of trained facilitators that we're, most likely going to have, and the demand, hopefully in a post-approval world, there'll be a lot of demand, for this type of therapy, because there's a lot of healing that we need to do. And I just, to think of people not being able to access it because there aren't enough trained facilitators, it was just kind of frustrating for me to think about. And so then I started to look into, so who are facilitators? What are their backgrounds? And it just seemed, really well aligned, honestly, for nurse practitioners in particular. Of course, I'm a little biased because I am a nurse practitioner, but psychiatrists and clinical psychologists are amazing and, are amazing facilitators for this. But I just, there's not that many of them. And so if we really want to scale this, I was like, well, maybe nurses, can play a role here. So I set out to kind of find the nurses in this field, met some amazing nurses who are doing some incredible things in the field of psychedelics, and actually helped organize a gathering for nurse leaders in this field to discuss, the challenges, the opportunities, forming alliances. And so anyway, so I realized though that not very many nurses, know about psychedelics. And so I, wanted to figure out ways that I could, help raise awareness and educate nurses about this field. And so I went to University of Pennsylvania for undergrad school and graduate school. And my husband and I each year support an initiative there. And so I always meet with the dean, and she knows that I like kind of tangible, innovative, projects to fund. And so in 2021, I was like, I'm just going to throw it out there and see what she says. And so I asked if they were doing anything in psychedelic assisted therapy. And she looked at me like I was crazy. I'm not sure that she had ever really heard of it before. She certainly, if she had heard about it, didn't have a lot of knowledge about it at the time. And so I kind of did what my husband did to me, which was, to say to her, keep an open mind. Let me send you some links, some, articles, podcasts. And, I would love to help develop some sort of an educational initiative. But if you aren't interested, no worries. Hopkins, Yale, NYU, they all have psychedelic centers. They all have great nursing schools. I can certainly go to them. We'd still support something at Penn. But, anyways, long story short, she gave it the green light. And so I helped them develop a psychedelic learning series. It was called the Psychedelic Revival. And it was in the first half of 2022. It was 6 virtual sessions and then followed by 1 in-person session at the end. And so, it started with the history of psychedelics, and then what does a psychedelic session look like? What happens, during it? Then the neuroscience, the kind of current landscape, the future, and then we had a panel at the end about access. And at the beginning of each of the sessions, we had stories of transformation. So we had videos produced of people who have used psychedelics for a variety of different reasons, and had them share their personal stories, which was actually like a really good way to ground everyone at the beginning of the session, kind of transition from their work day into the session, and, just really just humanized it and made us all realize why we were there and taking the time to be educated about it. And so that was a big success. We were really fortunate. We had over 2,400 registered participants over the course of the series. Wow. And that was really without any paid marketing or advertising or anything. And so there was obviously a desire to learn. So we ended up as a result of that, we we have a grant that we are co-funding with the Cohen Foundation, and that's to help educate nurses and social workers in psychedelics. And it's through Penn and Columbia, so we're piloting it at Penn Nursing and Columbia School of Social Work, and then our plan is to then share it with Penn's School of Social Policy, which is where the social workers kind of reside, and Columbia School of Nursing. And hopefully that will be successful. And then we'd like to replicate it and share it with other nursing and social work schools across the country, with the goal being to just increase a workforce of, nurses and social workers who are trained to be facilitators. So that's exciting. And, also, so that's one project that I'm working on. And then I'm also with our foundation in my new spare time, working with a lot of the different nonprofits in the space, helping support them, whether it's Fireside Project, Heroic Hearts, the Hope Project, some of the stuff that Beckley's doing, Shakruna, Reason for Hope. It's just been amazing meeting all of these incredible people who have started nonprofits in this space, and just learning what each of them is doing to help move the needle forward, and then just supporting, where we can. It's been honestly fun for my husband and I to do this together. Yeah. So he's kind of in the business world, and I've always been in healthcare and philanthropy. And so we're meeting in the middle here, and it's been great, really. We're energized by feeling like we can actually make a difference here. Yeah.
I mean, so I was scribbling furiously notes here. I want to pull together a thread of, I don't even know if you realize how impactful that, what you just said in such a short period of time is going to be for this space and for people just in the world. To piggyback on what we believe will be an approval in the psychedelic space in the next year or so for MAPS, Public Benefit Corporation, for MDMA for PTSD, MDMA assisted psychotherapy for PTSD in this very particular protocol, in this very particular way. What you've done though is expand the conversation, brought legitimacy to the conversation in ways that you can't even probably fathom quite yet. And those conversations that you had, with Penn and bringing awareness to this is just really fascinating. I mean, if you think about the thread that you pull together here, like since you were 16 years old, and this is where I go a little into to what would typically be kind of considered, esoteric or whatever, is like there's a synchronicity here that I find in every one of these conversations that I have with people about this world, right? This emerging conversation, much more honest conversation that's happening around psychedelics. This synchronicity thread is that we're bringing people to this space in new and different ways than I think anyone would have anticipated. This isn't like a conversation at the back of a Grateful Dead show. This is people that are extremely well-versed in their fields, that had this nag or personal relationship to this and are like, you know what, I can apply my life's work here in a way that can really make a difference. And I didn't necessarily know why I was doing this work or why this little piece of information interested me enough to keep going and dig into it. You're a busy person. You have a lot going on. Yes, you had a personal encounter and a personal family, someone close to you is affected. In any way, shape, or form, it's going to laser focus you. But that happens to lots of people, and they can't do things about it that would help other people around them, right? So It takes a very special type of person to not only get through that difficult time, but also see like, okay, I need to learn from this. I need to utilize my unique gifts in this space. And I love how those things sort of line up. I think I told you before, when we talked last time about how, University of Pennsylvania came to be even involved in this movement through maps and the personal synchronicities that occurred to get that conversation to happen, which led to this conversation, which leads to this podcast existing, which leads to more people hearing it. And it's just like, wow, this is powerful stuff that we've stumbled into here. And using your own unique situation, skills to bear have just an exponential benefit. And it's a beautiful thing when that can come together. And you mentioned something too that I wanted to point out. You mentioned the ketamine therapy and people's access to things. It's in all of our best interest that these things are well handled, well controlled, and taken out of the, I don't know, not necessarily out of the shaman space, but like out of the weird space that it maybe historically has been in, and really look at it from a natural human standpoint, and not allow it to get strange again. Do you know what, does that make sense? Like this shouldn't be such a weird thing that we're talking about this, because these plants and understandings of human behavior have been around for a long, long time. And
it's like we probably grew up around the same time, and we probably have Nancy Reagan's, words and the fried egg just ingrained in our brains. And so I think that there's this huge unlearning process. And so that's going to take a lot of public education. And that's another area that I'm really interested in, and helping, kind of reduce the stigma. And, just even within our small little town, I feel like my husband and I, even though at first we were very kind of quiet about what we're working on now and about this interest, but now, especially as I've gained more comfort and confidence by educating myself, I feel more comfortable sharing it with others, and kind of seeing this movement, even again, just in our little town, of people opening their minds to something like this. And even with the dean at Penn Nursing, so at first she was, as I said, she thought I was crazy. She knew me from the board. I'd been on the board for 3 terms. So she knew me, and she knew that I wasn't, or at least I don't think I'm crazy. And so she did keep an open mind. But now it cracks me up, because every time she sees something about psychedelics, whether it's a lecture or a podcast or an article, she sends it to me right away. And she's so excited, and she's really educated herself. And so I feel like it's just this kind of snowballing effect in a really positive way. And we just need to keep doing that. And for people to realize that, I think once you learn the history, even just a brief history, I kind of have a little bit of an elevator pitch about the brief history. And so when you kind of start with that, and then people are like, oh, and then they start to, very slowly kind of unravel and untangle some of the stuff that we have just ingrained in our brains from the way we were brought up, the war on drugs and DARE program. And, so, and thank you before. Oh, sorry, keep going. I was just going to thank you for your way too kind words before. I do think that things happen for a reason. I did used to believe in this kind of stuff. I'm not a particularly religious person either, but, when things happen, I just kind of stop in my tracks and take a step back and say, okay, what's the message? Well, what is this trying to teach me? If it's something bad that happens, every time there's any sort of adversity, my immediate go-to way to look at it is, okay, what's the lesson here? What am I supposed to be learning from this? Rather than focusing on the negative and the bad situation, it's always finding the silver linings, which are often just, it's a way to learn and grow. So,
it's almost like the psychedelic experience leads to a mindset that you can get to without the psychedelic experience. It's just more rare to do it, and maybe takes a longer time. But thinking this way about the broader nature of interactivity between humans, between events in our life over a long period of time, is kind of the messaging of psychedelics, the interconnectedness, those types of things. And it's very interesting to me that in order to progress it forward, everybody that touches it also has to have that mindset in one way or another to throw it out there. Like, here's you coming to this, 2-3 years ago after a very, straightforward, if you will, traditional pathway in medicine. And that, Michael Pollan's book did amazing things because it definitely opened people's minds. And I think the way he handled his approach was extremely just so acceptable. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't really argue with his approach. He was extremely skeptical. He was extremely careful. He was extremely diligent. The way he articulated trips is a skill in and of itself. I mean, that is putting words to the untenable, to the unknowable description, the ethereal of going on this journey for people. And by the way, people did it for no good reason, with no intention, a lot. And, pretty much came out of it either, okay or otherwise. It's one of those things where we also have to switch the drug discussion, not just in the stigma, but also like, this isn't something you're going to be doing all day, every day. Like, this is a profound shift. Yeah. And to put it in the bucket of traditional drugs or therapies is really a misnomer, the fact that it's even considered that way. It's there's a lot to unpack, and I find it interesting, having been embedded in it for a while now, that it's still new to people. That's kind of exciting, because I think most people have that reaction that you saw in the Dean, like, wow,
And Michael Pollan has been like one of my greatest teachers. And he, and I say that because, and I'm so grateful for the pandemic. And like, one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that there's so many opportunities to learn for free online. And so I've listened to every podcast of his, all of his webinars. And then I actually have gotten to know him through through his program at Berkeley, and we're supporting that training program. And I was able to thank him, for that. And I just think he's done an incredible amount, for this movement. And I just owe him a lot of gratitude, for being where I am today and being able to do what I'm doing today, and, helping move the needle forward in this area. So
do you think, so the insights that come from psychedelics, right, especially in an end of life type of scenario, it's almost like this is something that maybe we lost as a species that everybody kind of knew already. Like, we've almost been conditioned away from, especially I feel like in the U.S., the way death is handled. I have my own unique experience with a very rapid succession of deaths in my family, and I could compare one experience to a few weeks later how it was handled. Because we all saw this, like, oh my God, this isn't the way to go, and this was traditional medicine to just hospice, like just going to a hospice care model more in a very short period was like, oh wow, this is much better. Right. But if you could add in this thing that allows the person going through those things to actually also have peace of mind as they approach it, what a much better world we would have just across the board. Anyway, so it's like we're going through these pathways to bring humans back to the true nature of being human in a way, and I think that's exciting and fascinating, but also difficult to navigate and hard to make people really understand unless they dig into it a little bit, which is why Pollan's book was so amazing, because it got enough people to see that pathway.
I think by psychedelics allowing you to come to peace with your, imminent passing allows you to live whatever time you have left so much better, honestly. Like that's what I think that was where it helped the most, just kind of by dissolving the ego and just allowing yourself to kind of do some soul searching and figure out how you want to make that last part of your life as meaningful as possible. And in our situation, it was mending some kind of strained relationships and spending time with the people that he, cared most deeply about, and letting other relationships go and enjoying things like a good meal, his favorite foods, his favorite music, listening to jazz all the time. It was just like, it was a combination of, I think, the psychedelic experience. And then I also did this thing, it's called Go Wish, and it's a deck of cards that have like all your 40 different possible end of life wishes that you could have. And so I had him pick his top, I think it was 12 or 13 things. And it's anything like, having my clergy visit me, dying at home, being surrounded by loved ones, not being a burden on my family, being remembered by my accomplishments. Anyways, and I took a picture of his top, I think it was 13. And I said, this is our playbook. And I showed it to his oncologist and to the palliative care team. And I said that I promised that we were going to make sure that all of these wishes were fulfilled and that he wasn't going to suffer as well. And so I need your help. We need to kind of collaborate as a team here to make sure that we can achieve that goal. And they had never seen the cards before, and they were really appreciative of it. And anyways, long story short, the day before this loved one passed away, I was with him, and I, pulled up the picture on my phone, and he was still completely coherent at the time. And we zoomed in to each of the pictures, each of the cards, and literally we achieved every single goal. And so we gave each other a fist bump. I told him that he was getting an A+, and he was a competitive person. So he chuckled. And I think once he knew that he was getting an A+, and he had mended some of these strained relationships, and he had spent time with those who he really, felt closest to, that he was ready. And so it was as peaceful as possible. So I really credit it to the combination of the two things, the psychedelic experience, which just helped soften him. And, he was fighting so hard to be his old self when his body and his mind couldn't do that. And so once he stopped that fight, and, allowed himself the grace, to kind of focus on these other things rather than work and who he was, that really, just helped usher us all through.
I don't know if you can say, were they naive to psychedelics prior to that experience?
Yes. Yep.
No prior experience.
And so the first, no prior experience, but actually 3 different people who he respects all mentioned Michael Pollan's book and psychedelics to him within over the course of it was just a week or something. And so he's like, when 3 different people who I really know and respect are saying the same thing, maybe I should pay attention. And so, but yes, he was definitely, this was just not his thing, nor was it my thing, frankly. I mean, I grew up, I had a heart condition. I ended up with open heart surgery, and I was always told, no drugs for you, no drugs. And so, I drank alcohol and, smoked pot a few times, but this was not my thing. And so it's, when people hear that that this is what I'm kind of dedicating my time and energy to now, people, especially people who knew me when I was growing up, they're kind of shocked. But then once they hear, and I think once they hear my passion about it and my conviction about this is, being such a hopeful new tool in the tool chest, then they really start paying attention and asking questions and, wanting resources. I have a resource document that's probably 100 pages at this point, with all different links. And so depending on what their interest is, forward certain articles or podcasts or webinars. And so it's just, again, one step at a time, just kind of helping to raise awareness, decrease the stigma, and keep people's minds open.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because there's this thing when it comes to psychedelics, I think that's hard to really get. And I've talked about it before as almost like the way you can remember a dream. Like when you're in a psychedelic state, generally at the right dose and the right conditions, obviously, all those things considered, there's this thing, and Michael Pollan described this a little bit too, is there's this thing, and then as you come back to life, back to reality a little bit, and it starts to wear off, that thing you were like, oh, I'll never forget this. This is the most, and of course I always knew this, right? So there's this thing that you're like, I've always known this. How could I possibly forget this? And then when you come back to life, back to reality, you still know it, but you really can't hold on to it. It disappears like ether, like a dream. It just fades away. But just knowing that it was there once, I think, is one of the most powerful experiences as a human. So we've put this into this psychedelic bucket over the years. But to me, it's kind of, I wonder what you think about the idea that in the future, if it's not called psychedelic, or if it's just the treatment for when you have, at first, this certain issue, PTSD, for example, or the indications that it's used in at first, end of life, etc. I wonder if the stigma will fade too, because it's so profoundly just what you do as a human. This is the treatment plan, is you need to have this understanding. And then you start to think, well, that's probably what early humans did anyway. And they probably did it as the initiation ceremonies of kids, when we were tribes and these things were readily available to become an adult, or, the Eleusinian mysteries point to it was an experience people went to have so that they could become a better leader, better human, more enlightened human. And I just wonder how long that's going to take to get back to that, or if we're going to keep bottling it up and making it this weird thing.
I think a couple of things. I think the younger generations, the millennials and the Gen Zs, they don't have that stigma because they didn't grow up really with the war on drugs. So I think that's very positive. They seem much more open-minded to this. They're also much more open to talking about mental health. I think that the pandemic and our current mental health crisis has helped with that. I think that men, in particular, young men, are much more willing to be vulnerable than older generations. So I see a lot of signs that we're not going to have problems with the younger generations. It's really the older generations that we're going to have to work the hardest to get them to, to shift their mindsets. I know my dad has a friend who's a psychiatrist, and he's, in his late 70s. And, he was very against psychedelics when we first started to have a conversation. And then actually he tuned into Dominic Sisti's lecture at Columbia. He did a grand round. So Dominic is our connection. And anyways, and so he was open-minded enough to say that he was going to listen, to the lecture. And then after I heard from him, and his mind definitely is opened a bit more. He still wants to see the science, and as do all of us. The science is a key part of this, obviously. But at least I was happy to hear that he was open to the conversation. So I think that the younger generations won't be nearly as hard to, whether it's gender or just to everything these days, which is beautiful. I'm
We're preparing
optimistic.
a defense we might not have to use.
Exactly, you said it very well.
And
then the other thing is that when you were talking before, about having experiences during a psychedelic journey and then just forgetting about them after and everything. That's why I think that the integration is so important, and so important to start it as soon after the medicine wears out as possible. And, there is that afterglow, which I'm a big believer in, that kind of window of, 4 to 6 weeks, maybe even, who knows the
Yeah.
exact timeline, where you're just more open to making
Still
changes.
thinking about it. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
to make sure to take advantage of that and to let people know that's like such, even to kind of try and have a lighter schedule those, the weeks after journey, or carve out time, schedule it like a meeting, just to like sit and relive the experience and try and kind of connect some dots and come up with some ideas and changes that you want to make, because your kind of best chance of making those changes and having them stick is if you start them, during that window. And the other thing is that obviously, the medicines aren't legal yet here. And obviously there are ways, where you can do them legally. But when I did my MAPS training, they like to have some sort of an experiential training. And so since that was not an option to use any medicines, we did holotropic breath work. And I have to say that I went in completely skeptical. I was like, how is breathing going to get you to a psychedelic state? I just don't buy it. And I have to tell you, I think there were 58 of us in our cohort. I think all 58 of us got to a psychedelic state. And granted, it's a lot harder to do that breath work than it is to, eat mushrooms. But
right.
It was really profound hearing everybody's stories, and then my own story, and like what I experienced during that, and the changes that I've made as a result of what came up, during my holotropic breathwork session. So I think that we can't underestimate, the value of some of these other means of getting to that state.
Yeah. And I think about, I know this is like a simple example, but I think about it in terms of like when you look at the statues, giant statues and rock carvings around the world of people just sitting with their eyes closed. You can't put it into a statue breathing. You can't make the statue breathe. But the idea that they took so much time to illustrate like this, it's this. You need to sit and breathe and think. And you have these things, these chemicals obviously in your brain are there. You might trigger them and get bigger doses here and there with, depending on how you initiate those chemicals. But this is in us to do this. And I think that's really interesting. Like you might forget to the earlier point, like you might forget images you saw or, specific thoughts you had, but the bigger knowing part is the part that I'm talking about too, which is that like, I've always known this. And of course I've always known this. And it's the humanness, the oneness or whatever that is hard to describe that I think is just so profound. And to think that you need that perspective only, or that perspective can help you deal with so many things that people struggle with is incredible. It's like this universal human unlock code to block all kinds of bad thinking pathways and or bad experiences, or not inability to move past horrible experiences and see them in the way that you said, you just see things a little differently and change your perspective on them enough that you can appreciate, move forward, appreciate the people around you, the moment you're in differently. It's pretty amazing. And it's you bring your unique skill set to this mission. I bring my own unique skill set to this mission. And try to deliver the best way I can think of to figure out how more people can feel better every day and enjoy their life every day. That's really kind of what it comes down to. And it's fascinating. To your point, I've met so many interesting people, and you're just like, they come out of the woodwork, so to speak, once you start talking about it.
And from so many different walks of life. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's embarrassing to say, but like, I didn't really know any veterans before I became involved in this. I didn't have many friends in the BIPOC community or the LGBTQ community. And now it's like, like my world has expanded in like the most exciting ways, and just becoming like, having authentic friendships. It's not even like, I've just met people from these different, backgrounds, and kind of, it was a fleeting interaction. Like, we've gone deep, and I think that psychedelics really kind of help you do that too, and open your mind in those sorts of ways. And just back to the integration a bit, in the afterglow, in that period, I also, what I've learned is, like, we always talk about set and setting for the actual experience, but even the set and setting during integration, like, I know for me, when I want to do some deep, like, soul searching and thinking, I really need to, like, have the right setting. So I need, like, either caffeine or water or music or a candle. I need to carve out that time without any distractions. My phone has to be off. I can't be near my computer. Like, I take it seriously. Like, if I'm going to do that kind of internal work, then I want to make sure that I'm giving myself the best chance to succeed in making significant changes. And so I need to get to a deeper level of thinking that I can't do in my everyday, just a million emails and phone calls and texts and distractions. So that's been, one tool that's helpful. And also, you can often get the playlist. I know for our holotropic breath work, we were able to get the playlist, and there's certain, songs, certain pieces of music during that evoked, kind of the highlight of my experience, that in listening to it again kind of brought me back there. And I know that there's a little bit of research on that too, that you can, ask in, like, the clinical trials, if you ask for the playlist, and then you can have the playlist at home, and it brings you back into your experience without the medicine. And that can be a helpful tool with integration. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Do you think that the, I think it's really insightful of you to bring together nurse practitioners and the nursing field here, because it strikes me that nurses have this unique ability, patient bond, closeness to every single thing that's happening in a way that's different than most in the medical field. They become somehow so connected to their patients. Everybody that goes through these things within a day or two is like, and this is my nurse, she's amazing. You know what I mean? Like that always happens. And when you see that bond, it's just like, well, of course, these are the perfect people to help.
Yeah. It's nice hearing you say that. It's hard once, as a nurse, I know that I'm biased, but I always love hearing about people's positive experiences with nurses. And I do think that nurses are just really well aligned, with this field. Mental health nurse practitioners, I honestly think, are in the sweet spot, because therapy is part of their scope of practice, and they're prescribers. So that's like an amazing person to have, in the room with you. And obviously they also have all the, medical training. So.
Hey, pardon the interruption, but just to give you an idea just how cool and diligent and amazing Sandy is, before I posted the episode, she reached out to me and had listened to sort of the rough edit of the episode before I put it out. And she wanted me to correct this thing that she said, and I think it's a great thing to do, which when she said medical training, she really meant things more along the lines of, checking vital signs, handling adverse reactions, and she wished she had been more specific. Didn't certainly mean medical training or like, as doctors would be the first to say, nurses aren't trained in medicine in that same way. So she wanted me to clarify that, but it wasn't worth re-recording the episode. So I wanted to pop in and just make that clarification, and back to the interview.
And then, if you think about palliative care nurses who are used to sitting with patients who are at the end of life, or oncology nurses, even ICU nurses who are used to taking care of patients who are in altered states of consciousness, and just, and also sitting with patients for long periods of time, like in childbirth, right? Like that's the same kind of skill set that you need to be there to support someone through childbirth is, actually very translatable into what it takes to be, a good psychedelic facilitator. And so I think nurses bring a lot to this field. I in my kind of research and finding out what nurses are out there and who's doing this. And I was a little sad to see that there weren't many nursing voices at the table, as these decisions are being made about what types of professionals will qualify to be facilitators. I've had a lot of conversations with, whether it's MAPS or, just a lot of the people that are at the table to see if they can, bring nursing along with them. And so I'm hopeful that we're moving the needle forward in that direction. And then I think this program that we're doing through Penn and Columbia with nurses and social workers, nurses and social workers have complementary skill sets for something like this, to be a dyad or to be part of a multidisciplinary team. If there's like group sessions in the future, because there's going to be some different models of care. And, the nurse can focus on those who are having physically challenging sessions, while the social worker focuses on those who are having more emotionally challenging sessions. And, again, psychiatrists and clinical psychologists are amazing. There just aren't that many of them. So nurses, there's over 4 million nurses in the country. Social workers are the biggest group of therapists of counselors within the therapy kind of landscape. And, we come from diverse backgrounds. We're more cost effective, more affordable. So that will help increase access. So I think there's a lot of benefits to engaging nurses and social workers in this field, in addition to psychiatrists and clinical psychologists and other mental health counselors. So
it's amazing, because I remember in the early days of the pandemic watching, what was happening in the medical field and hospitals just getting crushed. And I was like, oh my God, we're creating an explosion of trauma in the nursing community and in the medical community that's going to need to be dealt with, and probably could benefit from, all of this healing that's happening and research that's happening in the psychedelic world. But it didn't click for me that those would be one of the best possible ways to meet the need and scale the need effectively moving forward, because you just have this incredible group at your disposal in a way. I think
there's some studies, actually. There's some studies going on now for frontline healthcare providers from the pandemic using psychedelics to help with the trauma that they experienced. And then I know that I'm involved in an organization called Reconsider, which is in the psychedelic landscape. It's a nonprofit, and we host gatherings for those in the psychedelic field in certain niche groups. So we've done gatherings with veterans and psychiatrists and nurses, and we just recently did one with first responders. So not necessarily frontline healthcare providers in the pandemic, but first responders who have been traumatized in a variety of different ways. So again, it's just we're doing policymakers. So we're trying to bring people together who are currently kind of working in their silos, and bring them together to again discuss the challenges, the opportunities, and how we can build alliances and build bridges too, because not everybody agrees in this field, as we know. So it's good to have the honest, open conversations and learn and grow from each other.
Amazing. Well, I want to thank you for your time and taking the time to explain all this and take us through your journey, because I think you're doing incredible work. And I really look forward to every phase of this, and invite you to come back and give us a progress update.
Thank you.
Do you have any major things you want to talk about coming up in the next couple weeks, months, that people can tap into or check out?
We are going to be doing a part 2 of the learning series that's going to be organized through Columbia as part of this grant. So I will keep you posted on that. We're actually, one of the topics we're going to dive deeper into is ethics, the ethics of psychedelics. And so that's something that Dominic's going to be helping us with, and possibly Amy McGuire, who's down at Baylor.
Okay.
And
how much of that material from those sessions are, publicly available? Are they in a spot where people could go check
it's all
them out?
available. Yep, it's all available. I have a link,
I'll throw
so if
links in
anyone's
the show
interested,
notes
they
then.
can.
Yeah,
I can send that to you. And then as far as reaching me, I'm not a huge social media person, and that's in some ways for mental health reasons, for my own self-care, that it would just be one more distraction. And I also at times have, well, in any case, I don't know. I prefer one-on-one, authentic conversations, relationships. And so I'm much more of a, in person or texting or emailing. So I'm just sandysamberg@gmail.com. If anyone wants to reach out, always love connecting with, a wide range of people and helping out, wherever I can. And I just, I feel, I know this sounds like so cliche, but I just feel grateful for everything that I have. And I recognize that I have a lot of privilege, and it's really like the least thing that I can do is to dedicate my time as a volunteer and, our funds from our foundation to just help improve the lives of others, whether it's, through cancer, through my cancer organization, or, mental health through this whole chapter. And, also our foundation funds, we try and help marginalized communities with everything from like food insecurity to, to housing and employment. And so again, just, approaching philanthropy as like lifelong learners and just people who want to, we're here just for this little blip of time. And I think that's something that psychedelics helps you kind of process also, right? That we're just this little speck on earth, and that it's not, it's not about ego, and that it's, again, just kind of want to leave this world a better place. So and even like, I realize that not everyone or most people can't do some of the things that I've been fortunate enough to do, because I don't need to worry about putting food on the table, and that I can do this as a volunteer. But I still think that everybody has the ability to make a difference in just like random acts of kindness, just like the smallest little things. Like, it was, I don't know, not that long ago, I was at Starbucks, and the credit card machine was down, and the woman in front of me didn't have any cash with her. And so I offered to just, pay for her drink. And she looked at me kind of in shock and, was really appreciative. And she said, well, can you give me your address and I'll send you a check? And I said, no, don't worry about it. I got it. And I said, you know what you could do? Just do something nice, pay it forward and do something nice for, another stranger. And she looked at me and was like, wow, I'm definitely going to do that. And I just have this image of her then doing it for the next stranger. And maybe then that stranger did it for the next person. And so if we could just, every little thing like that makes a difference. So
that's a beautiful thought to close on. I appreciate your time, Sandy, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon. Thanks for doing the podcast.
Sounds good. Thanks. I really appreciate it. Take care.
So deep in my heart that you're really a part of me. Yes, I've got you